Los Angeles, and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on Monday, February 24th. The LA Galaxy fall at home for the first time since 2023, doing it to newcomers San Diego FC, 2-0 loss. We're going to talk about the loss, talk about what we could see both pre-game, during the game, and after the game. So a lot of ground to cover. And are you worried if you're an LA Galaxy fan? Are you panicked already? I saw a couple people who were very much panicked on the social medias. But are you worried? And can the Galaxy figure this out? We're going to talk a whole bunch about that. To help us do that, the man who was in the press box next to me, or at least down the way a little bit from me, it's Mr. Kevin the Panda Baxter. Kevin, how you doing, bud?
Hey, we got to get rid of Vanny, Will Kuntz, all these guys. Out
Immediately.
Yeah. This cannot go on.
I was the shrine to Will Kuntz out front went in as peaceful. I don't know if I think there's probably bets on how long it lasts now. Will it stay at the fountain? If you didn't see it, somebody, and it may have been somebody from the Discord, but somebody erected a shrine to Mr. Will Kuntz at the fountain in Legends Plaza out there. So only a matter of time until that either falls in the fountain or gets placed higher up. The flowers, all the gifts should be coming, but the Galaxy losers, Kevin, at home. Guess what? Home winning streak done. There you go. See, you didn't have to worry about that.
I saw those things. Of course, I'm joking about Vanny and Will Kuntz, but I did see a lot of stuff online. People asking me questions. Should we get rid of Vanny? Look? Come on, everybody. Remember where this team was at the end of 2023. It was terrible. It was horrible. The leading goal scorer had 7 goals. It was a bad team. And Will Kuntz and Greg Vanny turned it around and won an MLS Cup championship, set a record for most goals scored in the playoffs, did not lose at Dignity Health Sports Park in 21 games. I mean, they had a real clunker against San Diego. And by the way, my apologies to San Diego. I was completely wrong. I saw them 3 weeks ago in Coachella, and I thought it was the worst MLS team I've ever seen. And I covered Chivas USA. And so that's bad. And I thought they were worse than Chivas USA. And then we talked about it before the game. We talked about the 6-0 win San Diego had over Red Bulls. And both of us said, no, that was Red Bulls were checked out. They were on the plane. They weren't really playing that game. It's sort of as an excuse. How could San Diego have done that? I don't know what happened between the time I saw them 3 weeks ago and the time I saw them yesterday. And granted, it was a poor Galaxy performance, which made them look a little better. But San Diego was much improved over their first game in Coachella.
Well, I mean, certainly I think they did some things that, let's put it this way, the strengths that they had set up worked against the weaknesses of the LA Galaxy this particular time, right? So certainly being strong and compact through the middle for San Diego. And by the way, so tight, so compact from top to bottom, front to back. San Diego was very much just clogging that middle. And when you look at the LA Galaxy, who lost Ricky Puig, who don't have Joseph Paintsil, and needed some, we'll use a Greg Vanny term, some dynamism, right? That he was talking about the lack of dynamism after the game. But if we're talking about the dynamic approach the Galaxy usually have, the ability to go both vertical and side to side to attack you down the middle and attack you up the sides, it was limited, and it's going to be limited. Listen, before we even played this game, I said, who's going to score goals? Well, the first answer is nobody. Nobody scored any goals. That was my biggest question for the preseason. Show me who's going to score goals on a regular basis. I knew it was going to be more difficult, and I think we talked about this more than once. Is what are you going to do without Joseph Paintsill? Because that's almost a bigger hurt right now than Ricky Puig. And listen, there's nobody on this planet, at least not any intelligent person, who thought that the LA Galaxy weren't going to struggle trying to find a way to play without Ricky Puig. Because don't talk to me about Ricky Puig's replacement. There is no replacement for Ricky Puig in all of Major League Soccer, right? There's not one. You're not going to find one. There's nobody who is as dynamic. I think that's the word of the day. There's nobody who's as dynamic as Ricky Puig. What he's able to do and how he's able to help the LA Galaxy. What he does in terms of dropping down deep and passing the ball out wide and being able to go in and beat 3 or 4 guys in the middle of the field to all of a sudden open things up. If you go and watch the game against San Diego, it's very clear the LA Galaxy, 1, playing into the strength of San Diego, so down the middle, and 2, lacking the ability to attack from multiple areas. Gabriel Peck got the ball, and 9 times out of 10, Kevin, there were 2 or 3 San Diego players already over and shadowing him on. So, and even whenever Peck was able to get by and turn the corner, they did a good job of clogging the middle and sort of keeping the LA Galaxy from finding any real open shots. So I think San Diego's an okay team. I think the Galaxy played particularly poorly. I think the time will tell us what both of these teams are. I don't think that either is a total tale right now of what the Galaxy can be, because you're going to look at what the Galaxy will develop into and what San Diego turns into. So,
well, by the way, dynamism as the word of the day. Remember Pee-wee's Playhouse used to have a word of the day. Of course, you remember that.
I do. Yes.
So that would be our word of the day.
Yeah.
As bad as the Galaxy looked and as improved as San Diego looked, without that mistake back in the Galaxy end, that looked like it was going to go to the 90th minute, 0-0. I mean, Peck had 3 shots, 1 on goal. They did a good job of bottling him up. And we saw that in the playoffs. It started with the Seattle game especially. Teams just took Peck out of the game and forced other people to beat them. And it worked. The Galaxy did get goals from Joveljic and Paintsill in the playoffs to beat other teams. But without those 2 guys, without Joveljic there, without Paintsill there, without Ricky there, it was just way too easy. You take Gabriel Peck out of the game and you pretty much just idle LA's offense. You were right. It's coming through the middle. My question is, as poorly as I think Cerrillo and Sanabria and even Marco Reus played, not getting the ball to Christian Ramirez, who had only 12 touches and did not take a shot at all on goal or off goal. The Galaxy only had 3 shots on goal. And so as bad as all that was that because the Galaxy were bad, or was because San Diego was good and denied them those things? Was a little bit of both?
Yes. You can say both. I'll say the Galaxy were bad. I mean, it was a poor game. It was outside of the mistake that happens, and certainly we'll go over lineups here in a second, but outside the mistake that happens in the second half, there was nothing really in that entire game leading up to that point where I thought that San Diego was dangerous offensively. Some half chances for sure, and I think they had more of the half chances, San Diego, in the first half. And so, they get gifted a goal, and when that happens, a lot of things sort of go sideways for people. And I really think that, you look at the LA Galaxy, this is a game that I think you're right. It was a 0-0 game. If it isn't for mistakes made at the back, and it's only a single mistake that the defense made, actually it was more like 2 mistakes that the defense made, but they got punished for one of them for sure. But now all of a sudden you're chasing the game. We know that the Galaxy, with the firepower they have, aren't going to be chasing the game as well as they were, right? So there's so many different levels of how this game could have gone. I think if you're the LA Galaxy, you would have hoped that it went differently. And the fact that you put yourself in a bad position and then you had to try to dig yourself out of that bad position. So I don't know, just interesting. Like I said, we'll go over some of the lineups here, but the whole build up to everything as well. There were no preseason games at Dignity Health Sports Park this year, mostly because of the stadium renovations, right? And they play out at Coachella, and they do Coachella, and they do all those things. So the first game of the season was more of a test run for everything than it probably has been in the past. So I know that the stadium looked great on the inside. as far as everything that looked. All the seats look great. Seeing all that, everything's sort of newly painted. They went through on the main concourse, and instead of you seeing like the cinder block walls anymore, they either painted that white so much that you can't see it. I think they actually skim coated all of that so that way you couldn't see the cinder block walls, and then they painted everything white. Everything looks crisp, clean. Walking around the stadium, it seems like there's a bunch of new food options. But I heard that, parking was a nightmare. In fact, I know one season ticket member who missed all but the first 15 minutes, all but the last 15 minutes of the first half because they couldn't get into the parking lot. Apparently, at one point, there were multiple entrances that were either shut down or impacted so much it looked like they were shut down going in there. So still some learning curves to sort of get over for that. But we were treated to a ring ceremony, and we were treated to the MLS Cup being brought down into the stadium by Kobe Jones initially, and then you had some members of the supporters groups, and eventually ending with one man here. I'll bring up his picture, Mr. Ricky Pouge, taking the MLS Cup and putting that.
Didn't he look kind of like an ice cream man in the whole white thing?
Ricky has some style. I think he's been getting some style pointers lately. But yeah, he shows
also
up.
First responders involved in that.
That was great too, right? Yeah, I mean, you saw everybody from fire department, and I think sheriffs. It was a lot of it was a good ceremony the whole day. They dropped the banner, right? So 2024 MLS Cup champions, that gets dropped as well. So that's now up in the rafters there. I did have pictures of the ring as well. Very nice. If you saw, I think Thursday night, we knew that the players got their rings, so we started seeing some pictures of it. Jostens is the maker of the ring, and so they put out the explainer on it and all that fun stuff. So is
that your ring?
Yeah, I'm right next to my seats, dude. Don't you know my bleacher seats? No, I don't get one. And nor Kevin. Here's the better question: why would you take one? What did I do? Right? Like there's so many people who deserve stuff that I don't think that they would.
I don't know. I think you could take a little responsibility for maybe the change from Chris Klein to Will Kuntz.
No, by the way, there was a super chat in here that I laughed and says Edwin $2 super chat. Time for a boycott? ? I thought that was good.
Oh, so, it worked last time,
right? Why not? Lasso, by the way, $10 super chat. Evening, gents. Well, that match was a tough one on the eyes. Not too many answers, just questions. Just the start of the season though, so gotta believe. Right, so Lasso still on the believe train there.
But here's the thing. My Yoshida brought this up. I don't remember if he brought it up or it was a question. I think it was a question to him. But so the home unbeaten streak is over. 21 games, including playoffs and Leagues Cup. That's gone. But the Galaxy have another streak. They did not lose consecutive games since October of 2023. That streak is on the line Sunday in Vancouver.
Yeah, not just Sunday in Vancouver. Then you have the whole thing that sort of sets March up is that there are 7 games, including 2 CONCACAF Champions games, 5 League Cups or 5 league games in there as well. So there's a lot going on, and so the Galaxy might have to pick and prioritize some of these things, and that may mean not paying attention to league and maybe going after CONCACAF Champions Cup. Certainly in Vancouver, there could be some switches and some things happen, maybe to make some adjustments on what we saw.
And this is where the injuries were really, I mean, the injuries played a huge part Sunday. I mean, let's not lie about it. It's like, as Greg Vanney said, we didn't look like a championship team. We look like a team getting to know each other, which they are. So now you say, okay, well, Marco Reus was not 90 minutes ready. He won't be 90 minutes ready Sunday. Probably. So that means if either he starts and comes out and you use a sub, use 2 guys.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Marco Reus is never going to be 90 minutes fit. He's not playing 90 minutes ever again. Where do you come up with some of this stuff? You have an old guy who you bring in for his leadership skills.
Hey, I'm an old guy
too.
90,
I get it, but who was brought in for his leadership skills from he's an absolute footballing talent. But you cannot expect, and I want you to level set with people. There should never be a game where Marco Reus goes 90 minutes. Unless it's an MLS Cup final again, or in a playoff game or something like that, where you're like, we're going to push him and see what happens, right? But like, you're kind of like stretching a rubber band, man. Like you stretch it too many times and it'll snap. So no,
and that's going to happen
60 minutes
with 7 games in March.
60
that's going to happen, and. You know, a lot of guys, not just Marco Reus, a lot of guys are not 90 minutes fit right now.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, most of the league isn't 90 minutes fit in terms of how it goes. But okay, so there's 7 games in March coming up. How many games does Marco Reus play? Because if you say 7, you should turn your microphone off. right? I mean, but no, this is reasonable soccer 101. Marco Reus should be expected to play 4 of those 7 games. 4.
So, but my point was going to be if the 11 people that started the game on Sunday were the best that Greg Vanney had,
right?
Now we're going to have to go into the bench. We're going to have to go deep into that depth for the 7 games. We're already saying guys are not going to play. If the 11 best guys you have can't beat San Diego, what are the possibilities that the depth is going to win in Champions Cup?
But like, what game are you playing here? It's like, well, these guys suck, so the next guys must suck worst. Except that some of the guys who came off the bench probably provided the best spark for the LA Galaxy. So
yeah, I thought Barry had a pretty good game. I thought he was much more dangerous than Christian Ramirez was, and I don't know if that's because he had a better game or because there's more chemistry. He's played with these guys for more than a year, and he knows them.
They changed the way they played in the final 15 minutes, so that also had something to do with it. Miguel Berry comes on, and all of a sudden the Galaxy are in all-out attack mode because they're already losing, right? So here, let's get to lineups because we're starting to go to tactics. I want to talk about it. But 2-0 is the loss for the LA Galaxy to San Diego on Sunday. That was a wonderful, by the way. I don't like afternoon games. I still like night games, but I do like them whenever they at least finish in the dark. So that was interesting. Let's talk about the lineup, though. This is, quote-unquote, the best starting lineup. Number 1, Novak Mitrovic in goal. We will talk about that. There's actually a super chat about that. So we'll talk. Miki Amane at right back. Amiro Garces at center back with Maya Yoshida next to him. And then John Nelson out at left back. You had Marco Reus, Cerrillo, and Sanabria in that center 3. And then you had Diego Fagundes, Christian Ramirez, and Gabriel Peck up as your top. The Galaxy play more on a 4-2. I always say 4-2-3-1, sure. It plays a little different than that whenever you actually look at how it plays. So the 4-3-3 here, probably a little bit of a misnomer. Royce is playing up in a triangle more or less above Cerrillo and Sanabria in a double pivot more or less. Then you have Diego Fagundes, who sort of play outside Cerrillo on the left-hand side, and Gabriel Peck, who plays outside Sanabria on the right-hand side. Just imagine, though, that Cerrillo and Sanabria play very very central, and that Royce also plays fairly central, and that gives you an idea of sort of how everything gets spread in that particular way. Looking at San Diego's lineup with Chucky Lozano, Ingvartsen, of course Anders Dreyer, who ends up getting both of the goals and actually won MLS Player of the Match Day for the very first one. You had CJ Dos Santos, who had to make 1 or 2 good saves. You were talking about Miguel Berry. Had one of those shots, a great little feed by Cerrillo and Yamane, and then eventually Berry in there. So you get to the game. Here's the thing on the starting lineup, and something Adam, $10 Super Chat says, guys, I know I'm mostly wrong, but I feel Coach Vanney underestimated San Diego by starting Mitrovic over McCarthy. Why ruin something that was going well with the goalkeeper position last season? Well, I don't think that Greg Vanney thinks, and I think we've been fairly clear on this. Greg Vanney says that Novak Mitrovic is the number 1. I mean, that's what this is saying. He's saying he's the number 1 goalkeeper. He's saying that he should start over John McCarthy. You can take that however you like. I tend to, again, I think we've touched on this from all the different angles. One, the reason that you're playing Mitrovic, Kevin, is because you invested a lot of money in him. He's a young player. He has a higher upside, and eventually I think you'd like to see him either have some success and move him on and then get the payday from that, or figure out that he's not going to be successful here and move him off as well. So those are sort of the things that I think are going into that. And then with John McCarthy, you have a ton more experience. You know what you're getting from John McCarthy. So the upside is higher on Mitrovic, and the amount of money they invested is probably higher on Mitrovic. And so in that way, Novak Mitrovic right now is their number 1. I think Greg Vanney thinks that all things being equal, and I hear this all the time, all things being equal, Novak Mitrovic is a better distributor of the ball, and that's one of the reasons. I've also heard the arguments that he's better in the air, a little more aggressive in the air in the box, and so that could also help in that thing. But regardless of what that says, Greg Vanney is telling you, not me, not Kevin, not anybody else. Greg Vanney is telling you Novak Mitrovic is the number 1 goalkeeper right now.
Well, I'll tell you that too. And Yoshida also said that Mikovic is much better at playing the ball out of the back, and he talked about that. And the Galaxy want to do that more, and they felt a little hamstrung last year. They couldn't do it as much as they wanted with John McCarthy. But Greg Vanney also told me very early last season that he wanted Mikovic to be the starting goaltender. He said John McCarthy's great. We hired him mainly because he's a great locker room guy. He's going to be a tutor to the young goalkeeper. We're going to bring him along. And by the end of the season, Mikovic is going to get a lot of playing time. And the plan was that he would finish the season last season as a starter. Now, a lot of things changed. John McCarthy had a very solid season. It wasn't his best season, but it was very solid. It would have been hard to move him out of there. Mikovic kind of shot himself in the foot with that little mutiny or whatever it was in the middle of the season. And I think a couple of things happened. I think Vanny said, we're not going to reward that and make him the starter. And by then, again, John McCarthy was playing very well. You don't want to mess with that success. Even if you look at that and say, oh, we want to play out of the back more. This is the guy. You don't want to do that in the middle of the season. So the plan was to make Mikovic the starter last season. It didn't happen. What I'm worried about now, though, if you're a Galaxy person, is we talked about in the preseason, it was obvious that there had been a change in goal. When you looked at who was playing the first team minutes, it was Mikovic. So he was going to be the starter. We knew that going in. There was not a surprise when he was the starter. But Greg Vanney did that partly because he wanted to avoid, I think, a goalkeeper controversy. He didn't want to have that quarterback controversy. Who's starting? You have a young goalkeeper. He made a pretty bad mistake, led to the first goal, opened up the game. Now there's a problem because now you at least outside the locker room with fans, and if you look in some of the chat rooms and stuff, there is a little bit of a controversy. Hey, John McCarthy should be back in there. He wouldn't have made that mistake. And you have a young goalkeeper maybe either looking over his shoulder or wondering, wow, did I really blow my chance? This has gone sideways for Greg Vanney, and I think he needs to show the young goalkeeper that he has confidence in him and make sure he's not looking over his shoulder. And so I think he's going to definitely get the start against Vancouver. We'll see what happens with Leagues Cup, whether you put the veteran in, or not Leagues Cup, with the Champions Cup, put the veteran in for the big games, if they play a Costa Rican or Mexican team, or do they stay with the starting goalkeeper. It's interesting. Things did go a little sideways with that one bad play in the 52nd minute yesterday.
It did, and that is an important part of this. I mean, we've already talked about it a whole bunch, but looking at, in the lineup and looking at Cerrillo and Sanabria and how important their roles are, Sanabria's been with the team, like 2.5, 3 weeks now? I mean, it's not a tremendous amount of time. He hasn't had a whole bunch of trainings. I think we got to see him like in the final 2 preseason games where he got a couple minutes in the Wednesday game and then, 45 or 60 minutes in the Sunday game. Hasn't had a lot of time. You're going to have patience with that. I think that Sanabria could be a really good player. But watching him where he's at and what he's supposed to do, he's got to figure out how to find space vertically. Some of the successes the Galaxy really had was because Cerrillo was able to break a couple lines with his passes. That's what was missing, was sort of the ability to pick and poke through the central midfield with vertical progressing passes. There was a lot of side-to-side action, not so much on the vertical side. So getting that ball up and down, being able to connect in. And it's up to Cerrillo and Sanabria. I know a lot of people have said, how bad Marco Reus was. Marco Reus struggled in this game the same reason that Christian Ramirez struggled in this game. It was service. Reus isn't one who's going to drop back and pick up the ball like Ricky Puig, nor should he. That's the job of Cerrillo and Sanabria. So the bottom line is it's up to those guys to be able to find space for him. You're doing it against a San Diego team that's packing the middle, packing the center, so there's already not a lot of space. So you're going to have to get creative with how you feed the ball to guys like Christian Ramirez or Marco Reus or quite honestly, even Diego Fagundes. Now, Greg Vanney was talking about Diego Fagundes and said that he was isolated. He was on an island too much, right, out on the left-hand side. So that was another thing. I saw people calling for Diego Fagundes' head. Listen, you can go all through the FOTMob. The only person who FOTMob thinks played well in this game, which by the way I think is a correct statement, it was Miki Amane with a 7.2 rating. And I thought he played really well. And we sort of hinted at the very beginning of this, Kevin, that Miki Amane was a guy who's going to take a step forward and really be a good player. It's interesting because I actually think having him tuck in the way that he normally does, which he comes up from that right back spot, sort of slides into that left, actually played into San Diego's favor a little more, which was, again, moving that ball more centrally and getting it back into sort of the folds of their formation and keeping it tight. So, for me, I need to see more out of Sanabria and Cerrillo in order to get the ball forward and be able to find stuff. That's going to be a tricky partnership, Kevin, because you're talking about the double pivot. A double pivot is always a little crazy, right? You have to have trust in the other people. The most successful double pivot the LA Galaxy ever had was when Marcelo Sarvis and Juninho used to play in the center of midfield, and watching those two guys, knowing who was going to go forward, who was going to go back. So the cool thing is that Cerrillo and Sanabria are both young guys. and they should be able to figure out how to develop in that central midfield and really make it their own. And then whenever Ricky comes back, they should already have an identity established to be able to sort of help out and be able to feed Ricky. And if all things go well, whenever Ricky comes back, he gets the ball much further up the field than he has in years past. So there's going to be a lot of learning curve in there. But Sanabria is just... he's green still, Kevin. There's not enough time there. They need more time, more games, and good for the LA Galaxy. They have 7 games coming up, so I'm sure he's going to get some.
Well, I thought there was some good play off the bench. Again, Miguel Berry. I mean, granted, they did change the way they played a little bit. The game had opened up by them. Miguel Berry I thought was pretty good. Ruben Ramos Jr. thought was okay. Elijah Winder in MLS debut was decent. There is a trivia question to this game. This was the 4th, and by the way, there apparently really is an MLS Cup curse when you look at it. Nobody's won back-to-back MLS Cups since Bruce Arena with the Galaxy in 2011 and 2012. Since that time, only 2 teams have even made the final in back-to-back years. LAFC and Seattle did it. You have a team like Toronto in 2017 won the MLS Cup. The next year, they lost 18 games, didn't make the playoffs. It was the second most games Toronto had lost up to that point in franchise history. 2020 in the COVID season, Columbus won the MLS Cup. The next year, they didn't make the playoffs. There really is kind of an MLS Cup curse. But having said that, this was the 4th time in 30 years in MLS that a reigning MLS Cup champion played an expansion team in its opener. It seems like it should be more than that, but it's the 4th time that's ever happened. It's the first time the reigning MLS Cup champion has lost.
Right.
It's also the first time the reigning MLS Cup champion has been shut out, by the way, which is obvious. But DC United twice, they beat Chivas USA in Miami, the old Miami team. And then Colorado beat Portland in 2011. So those are the 4 times that, the 3 previous times that an MLS Cup champion has played an expansion team in the first game. And this was the first time the expansion team won.
We should have, I wish Ray would make us a jingle that's like totally useless stat coming up. Like, but okay, what happened at the end of those seasons? Like what does this show? Like, it doesn't show anything except that it's only happened 4 times and 3 of the 4 won that game, right?
Well, we know those teams, with the exception of DC United, we know those teams did not repeat as champions. It just doesn't happen. Right. And it has a lot to, we've talked about this ad nauseum on the show. Galaxy missing 5 starters from last season, if you include Caceres, who was the starter at the beginning of the year. Where did they go? Why did they leave? They left because they couldn't be fit under the budget cap. Marky Delgado got traded. Brugman got traded.
Right.
Joveljic got traded because they couldn't fit under the salary cap. Why couldn't they fit under the salary cap? Because the team went deep in the playoffs and won MLS Cup, and there were a lot of bonuses and raises and other things that had to be paid out. So there is an MLS Cup jinx. If you win, then the team, you can't keep the band together because there's just too much going on financially.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Gary, by the way, $5 super chat. On a lighter note, what's everyone's favorite flavor of Sun Chips? And then he reminds us, trust the process. Do you have a favorite flavor of Sun Chips? How many different flavors of Sun Chips are there, Gary? Can we know that? I don't remember that I've had more. Like, I think I've had original flavor. I think there's like a tomato, a sun-dried tomato one, which you can miss me with that 100%. Isn't there like a ranch one, like a zesty ranch? Cool Ranch
and Zesty Ranch.
Okay. Yep. Okay. $2 super chat from Adam. I feel Mitrovic had bad distribution yesterday. I didn't have
one time he did for sure.
We're about to dive into that because I'd really like to. I would like one. Alex Ruiz and I got into a discussion about the goal that was given up and whose fault it was. And I say Mitrovic shouldn't have made the pass, but also that Garces is a professional soccer player and probably should know how to trap the ball and be able to kick it out. And I go, so it's more like 50-50 to me than it's just one. Well, we can add more to the blame pie because I went through and did a screenshot as well. So you guys all watched it. Everybody saw it. There was a pass up the middle, playing out of the back. It was goal kick, actually. It went from Mitrovic up to Cerrillo. Cerrillo felt some pressure on his back, and so then passed it right back to Mitrovic. Mitrovic launched a waist-high chip towards Garces, who Garces then tried to control. And I would like to point out, whenever I watched it live the first time, I thought Garces slipped on the initial receiving of the ball, and that's what caused the problem. No. Completely false. A ball that was waist high, Garces couldn't control. He knocked it into the path of the attacking San Diego player.
Chucky Lozano.
Well, it wasn't Chucky Lozano. It was. Yeah, it was Chucky Lozano, and who passed it to Anders, and Anders is the one who buried it because Anders had both goals.
And by the way, a very good pass because there was another player in the middle. I don't know who it was. There was another player in the middle of the box, but Mickey Imani was pretty close to him. Mickey Imani had released up the field on the pass to Garces and then rushed back. And he was, I don't know if he would have been able to mark the guy or make a shot difficult, but he was there. And so Chucky's pass went across the goal to over to the player on the far side, Dreyer, who's wide open.
Dreyer, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was. And he was wide open for a reason, is because everybody had just pulled out of there. But let's go back to the freeze frame. One is that when Cerrillo gets the ball, yes, he's being pressured from the backside, but two is that he has both Maya Yoshida in a position to receive the ball, and he also has John Nelson if he wanted to swivel his hips and move that way. More difficult just from the direction of the ball is coming. It's always usually easier to pass the ball back from the direction it came because you have to receive the ball in that direction most of the time. So I understand that Cerrillo put it back. Greg Vanny said he wanted to look at the tape because he felt like perhaps Novak wasn't under as much pressure as he said he was, as he thought that he was in terms of what Novak thought the pressure was. And then also with Garces and where he's standing, I would expect that he would actually be a little bit wider. And the thing you don't see in this clip is that he's actually moving into that wider direction whenever Novak Mitrovic comes in. But how? No. And by the way, stop lying about the pass. The pass came with some pace. BS, he chipped it. All right. It didn't have that much pace. It wasn't that hard to control. I give myself a 25% chance of trapping that ball into a good position. All Garces had to do was knock. It wasn't so far out in front of him that he was caught completely flat-footed. All right. This is just bad. And by the way, Garces had another horrible giveaway about 10 minutes after this one, right in the box again. Garces is going to be the best LA Galaxy defender, and if you saw him, he had Lozano in his pocket for 90% of that game. There was maybe one play where Chucky Lozano sort of broke free. This isn't one of those. This isn't one of the times where you're like, oh, well, Lozano got the best of him. No, he didn't. But Garces made an unforced error. I would expect any professional soccer player to be able to make that trap. I really would. It's not that difficult.
It was a bad pass, and even Vanny said Garces was looking like he was knocking it down in self-defense. I thought it was a bad pass.
It is a bad pass. It's just not impossible to trap.
It's not impossible.
It's not even like, again, professional soccer players, they play this game all the time. There's a training.
It was a poor first touch, and if Chucky wasn't so close to him,
it's a horrible first touch.
He had a chance to recover, but Lozano was closing pretty fast.
Yeah.
And by the time he came off his foot, it was kind of a Giazzi Zardes first touch, where it hits his foot and rolls away.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you look at this and you say, okay, listen, Garces still has some maturing to do. He didn't play. I thought he played really well at times, and I thought he had some boneheaded plays at times. But the bottom line is, and you mentioned it, looking at the subs that came in and looking at who got to play, right? So Ruben Ramos Jr. was good. Liked him. Elijah Winder coming in and adding some verticality through the middle whenever Royce comes out. I wouldn't be surprised if you start Winder in Vancouver, especially on the turf with Marco Reus around, right? You don't want to play Marco Reus on the turf. Don't play him on the turf. That's fine. So you can start Winder. I'm going to warn you right now, Winder starting is going to be 1,000,000 times different than what you saw him do whenever he came in. When you're down a goal, you're less worried about defense. You know why? Because who cares if you lose by 2 goals? Losing by 1 goal is enough to make sure that you don't have any points. So trying to go and get a goal, trying to go and get the offense going is the most important part of all of that. So Winder had free reign, as did Ramos Jr., to be able to press his way up through the center of that of the defense or up through the center of San Diego's defense and not have to worry so much about tracking back. I thought one of the big changes that was nice was Aude coming on the left-hand side. This LA Galaxy team is struggling to create offense, right? And we saw it through the entire preseason. One of the reasons that it is one, Ricky Puig not there, and two, Joseph Paintsel not being there. Paintsel balances the formation, having somebody who's able to attack on the right and somebody who's able to attack on the left. Imagine you get Joseph Paintsel in there, and then you can also play somebody like Diego Fagundes in at the 10 if you wanted to do that. Or you can put somebody into the center where you can move Joseph Paintsel in for Christian Ramirez, right? There's a whole bunch of options that sort of open up whenever you're able to get Joseph Paintsel back, but you're not creating any offense from that left-hand side. Vanny talked about Diego Fagundes being isolated. There's one really good way that I know of, and certainly it showed itself whenever he came in, to create offense up that left-hand side and to create Diego Fagundes more involved in the play, and that's to bring Julian Aude in on the left side. It's not John Nelson. John Nelson, whenever you need somebody to play defense and only defense and not have to be super creative, John Nelson is that guy. He is a stand-up defender. But right now, the LA Galaxy can't score. They don't have any offense-generating plays, right? So you need more offense. And one of the ways to get more offense is to move Julian Aude into that lineup. You do that, he can overlap with Diego Fagundes. He can cut inside. He gets a little more creativity. He's also a very good defender. So you're not losing anything. You're only going to gain something. So you need Aude, in my opinion, on that left side.
Well, and those other answers aren't going to come for a while. Ricky Puig, the ice cream man, he's probably not back to midsummer. Greg Vanney was asked about that yesterday. He didn't give a date for either Ricky Puig or Joseph Paint. So Ricky Puig, we know, is midsummer. It's going to be a while. It's ridiculous even to talk about him right now. But Greg Vanney talked a little bit about Joseph Paintsil and said, look, it's a quad injury. These injuries are things that quads and hamstrings, once you pull those, it never really goes away. You have to be super delicate with those, and you have to give, if the player is ready to play, you give them another 2 weeks, because you got to be careful. And so, and Greg Vanney said that, we're not even counting days yet. We're not even thinking about it, because we want him to have one injury this season, the one he has now, and not one that keeps coming back all season.
He also said he thought it would be a couple more weeks. And then he said, but he also didn't have a preseason, so we need to be very careful about that, right? Like, it was one of those, it's like, hey, yeah, we might be able to get him back to training in 2 weeks, but then we're going to take our time with him, right? Like, it's one of those. We're going to, as you said.
But he was in Coachella, which is a good sign. He was around the team. He was in Coachella. I don't know what he was doing there. He was in uniform at the games. But, I say that because Ricky wasn't there for most of the time. I don't know if he ever came out to Coachella. He was not around the team. Joseph Paintsil was at least around the team. He's mixing with the guys. He's developing maybe some of that chemistry, at least off the pitch. I think that's all helpful. He might not be able to do a lot of drills on the pitch, but he was around the team, and Greg Vanney thought it was important enough to bring him to Coachella to have him be there.
Yeah, no, so yeah, I think Joseph Paintsil. But I mean, this is one of my solutions for if you want to play better against Vancouver, is that Julian Aude comes in at left back. I also think, again, I think that Elijah Winder could probably start in place of Marco Reus if you wanted to do that. So I think just those little tweaks help you balance out that a little bit. And I expect that Diego Fagundes would be more involved in that. But you can't be playing Diego Fagundes back in behind everybody all the time. That's not his game. He's not playing the stretch game, right? That's why Joseph Paintsil really provides that different dimension, is able to be, he is the fastest guy in the league last year, but the fastest guy in the league, able to sprint out and sort of take on defenses and run right by him.
Yeah, they were plotting yesterday. They were missing that speed. That's one thing. It's a good point. Is it was noticeable. They were playing. It would seem like they were playing at 60% speed. They just weren't fast.
No, they weren't fast. Well, and I thought it was really telling. Greg Vanney goes, we're going to go back and look at the tape, but I have some questions on some of the decisions they make, right? Like, 'cause some of the decisions just didn't make sense in terms of how we play and what we're trying to do, which I thought was a really interesting thing. Which means that hey, either everybody expected the Galaxy to play different, or even the Galaxy expected them to play different, and they didn't. So I think there's some hope in there that this was just a flat game. I certainly think that you put somebody in like Sanabria in a position that's so important, and having him not play well is probably what starts everything rolling down the hill, right? That's sort of probably the linchpin in what the LA Galaxy are trying to do, is that Sanabria has to be better. And the only way that I can think of to sort of decentralize that a little bit is, one, again, to bring Aude in and sort of allow that, because then you also allow Miki Amane to track up on the right-hand side, so you get sort of those overlapping runs, and you're able to sort of decentralize some of that attack. The Galaxy are very good at playing through the middle when Ricky Puig is there, and I think that they still need to retain the ability to do that, but they don't need to be as dependent on it. And so I would like to see the wings a little bit more, and that means that Gabriel Peck is going to have to create more chances, maybe than he's going to score, and that's going to be sort of reliant on, again, if they can be dangerous from the other side of the field. And what we saw on Sunday night was that nobody was dangerous. I still think the question mark is out on Christian Ramirez and sort of how he fits in, but we talked to him afterwards, and he said, it's just the beginning of the season. This is a long year, and where everybody's just starting to really get to know each other. He was sort of like, I've only been in camp for 10 days, and something like that. Maybe it's probably a little bit longer than that, but not much longer. So again, Christian Ramirez hasn't been with the team that long. Sanabria hasn't been with the team that long. You're trying to work these guys in. It's going to take a little bit of time. That's why we said, Kevin, on this show, you and I have talked about how the first couple months of this season might be a little rough for the LA Galaxy as they try to learn how to play without the injuries of Paintsil right now and Ricky Puig. But getting Paintsil back is really important. Just stop for a second and think that the LA Galaxy started the season with only one designated player. And that should tell you all that you really need to know.
Well, yeah, and we kept putting up that chart last year, how many minutes the designated players played, and it was the most in, I don't know, a decade. When you look at all three designated players and how many minutes they played, it was a lot. And now they're already, they're without two designated players for the first probably month of the season at least. They'll be without one until the summer. There was it was interesting to listen to Maya Yoshida yesterday and Christian Ramirez. Ramirez and Diego Fagundes both talked about how the Galaxy, as the defending champions, they're going to get everybody's first best game. There's a target on them all season. A team like San Diego just, starting out, this is a big win for them. This is a big, a scalp for them to get the defending champions and beat them in the first game. Every team, you may go into a game in August with Sporting Kansas City, might be 2-14 or something. If they beat the Galaxy, they make their season. The Galaxy haven't had that pressure for a long time. They haven't been the big dogs in the fight for a long time. So it didn't matter for many of the past 10 seasons if anyone beat the Galaxy. It wasn't a big deal. It is now. That changes a lot. And, Greg Vanney and Christian Ramirez did talk a little bit about, hey, you know what? It's a new team. Our big guys aren't there. We're missing Joseph Painter. We're missing Ricky Puig. It's not the way we play. Maya Yoshida came in and he just said basically no excuses. So we're missing the guys. We knew they weren't going to be in the game. We should have adjusted. We're missing those guys. But he did make a good point too, because some people were talking about, look, the home winning streak or unbeaten streak is gone. We don't have to worry about that. We're coming into a new season. We lost the first game. Takes a lot of that pressure off. We're not going to go 34-0. We know that. Maya Yoshida said, you know what? The next game is the most important game because we need to show that this was an aberration, that this isn't the way the season is going to go. We also have that streak of not having lost 2 in a row since October of 2023. We don't want that streak to end as well. So his thing was, we need to be better, and we need to be better by Vancouver. We can't just work our way into the season. We need to prove we're the champions, and we need to do it now. One bad game, that's inexcusable. 2 bad games is beyond inexcusable.
Yeah, the schedule coming up for the LA Galaxy, as we said, 7 games coming up. You have the Sunday game, Vancouver and LA, and then of course you have the 2. Do they have the dates right on this? Because they have it as 3-3, which would be the day after the LA Galaxy play.
No, I believe it's Wednesday.
That's what I think so too. So anyway, but what you need to know is that there will be a game that the Galaxy will have to play. It's the winner of Real Salt Lake and Herediano, and the Galaxy don't know who that is yet. And I believe that game comes up on Wednesday, right? It's Tuesday, Wednesday.
Tuesday or Wednesday, and right now both teams played to a scoreless draw in the first game. So
that's correct.
Away goals come into play on this, but basically whoever wins the second game is going to go on.
Yeah, so we'll watch that as that goes. But the Galaxy away to Vancouver on the turf up at BC Place. Vancouver coming off of a 4-1 win over Portland that had a red card for Portland in the 11th minute. So that's something to watch there as the Galaxy continue. Then home to St. Louis. The Galaxy will be home to their CONCACAF Champions Cup opponent, away to Portland, away to Minnesota, and then home to Orlando City. So a lot of games coming in a very, very, very short amount of time. So everybody needs to buckle up for that. And watching the LA Galaxy again, Kevin, here's the bad thing is that if the Galaxy don't somehow figure out a way to get a good positive result out of Vancouver, and then you go into CONCACAF Champions Cup game, if you start racking up losses and no wins, then things start mounting, right? Like then pressure starts to build, that type of thing. So the Galaxy really need to find a way to win one of these games and win one of these games in a good solid fashion. So that way everybody goes, oh yeah, the Galaxy are fine, and so that way they tell themselves that the Galaxy are fine. It's one of those. You don't want to. You can't win the championship in the first month of the season, but if through 5 league games and 2 CONCACAF Cup games, if you don't win some of those, you're not going to be in a good spot.
Right, and there is some pressure on this Vancouver game. First of all, you're absolutely right about Paintsell. Getting him back is not the panacea. It doesn't bring back Ricky Puig as well, but it does change a lot of things because it gives you that speed. It's going to force teams to pay a little attention to that. Not that Diego Fagundes isn't somebody that teams need to pay attention to, but Joseph Paintsell brings a lot of different tools to the game that Diego Fagundes doesn't, and that's going to free up things for Peck on the other side. Also, those crosses coming into the box, because we found out when Miguel Berry was in there last season, if somebody's in there, if it's Jovelich or whomever, some of those crosses are going to find the target. And so I think that getting Paintsell back would help solve the Christian Ramirez problem too, if there is a problem there. But I think the most pressure right now is in goal on Mikovic. After Again, we can talk about who was really responsible for that first goal, but the point is there was a mistake that led to a goal that opened the game up. He's getting the chance to play. There is a little bit of a controversy, at least among the fans, about whether it should be McCarthy that he earned that. If he has another bad game in Vancouver, or doesn't have a good game, maybe that sort of din is going to grow a lot louder. So I think he's the one that really needs to have a good game in Vancouver.
Backup quarterback syndrome. Everybody wants the guy who's not playing to play. The whole deal. I have multiple times talked about John McCarthy and what I think is a reasonable, sort of look at it, that John McCarthy didn't do anything wrong to lose the spot. And so for him to be sitting on the bench right now, it's a tough break. This is when this business gets ugly, right? It's a business, all those things and everything goes. I don't think that Mitrovic is going anywhere. And I don't think that change is coming anytime soon. So I would chill out. I don't even think, I do think there's a good chance McCarthy plays in CONCACAF Champions Cup. Absolutely.
I think that would be a good call, too, especially if they get deep in the tournament against some of these Mexican teams where the pressure gets to be really big. I think he would handle it better. Another thing with McCarthy is you talk about the backup quarterback syndrome, and that's very real. If a team is losing and Tom Brady is not doing well, people were talking about making a change with the Chiefs in the Super Bowl because the game wasn't going well. No, you don't do that. You stay with the guy that brought you there. But McCarthy is not going to fuel that. McCarthy is a solid guy, a character guy. He knows what's going on. He knows what his job is. You're not going to hear, I don't think you're going to ever hear a bad word from him. He's going to be backing his starter up all the way. So this is going to be something that's generated outside, and we'll see if it even penetrates the locker room in any way.
Yeah, I don't think it is. By the way, McCarthy had a perfectly fine game, by the way. Made some outs. Or, not McCarthy, Mitrovic. Mitrovic had a perfully fine game.
Made some good saves.
Yeah, made some good saves. Did some
a
things.
really good one on Chucky Lozano.
Yep.
You mentioned that one time he got away from Garces. He made a really good save on that play.
Really good save. He made 2 really good saves. So, I mean, again, it's there. I thought his distribution was okay. Again, I think it's similar to McCarthy. I don't know that there's a whole lot of separation between these two guys. I keep waiting to see it. So I'm in. I'm ready to see Novak Mitrovic. I also think that as this goes, as his confidence grows, that Mitrovic could absolutely be a all-star type goalkeeper. The upside is so much higher for him. So I can see that. But yeah, I don't think Patrick was pointing out Mitrovic didn't have a bad game, did he? No, I don't think he did, Patrick. It's just decision making, right? But one of the things that everybody's told is that Mitrovic does better in the distribution, and his pass was a bad pass. I agree it's a bad pass, just also a bad trap. The one thing with goalkeepers, and I've heard this a lot, is it came up a lot during COVID when teams weren't able to train together and stuff, is if you're a midfielder or even a striker, you can go out and kick a ball against the wall. You can do things. You can do drills. I saw Carly Lloyd at the prime of her career in a gym in New Jersey practicing by herself. And she said that's what made her good, is these drills that she would do by herself. With a goalkeeper, the only way to get good and to get fit is to get in goal and make some of those decisions you talked about and learn which way to dive on balls and take shots. You have to do that. And he has to be in game situations to learn that. And so you're not going to learn that in practice. You're not going to learn that sitting on the bench. You got to give him a little bit of leeway, but I just think he needs to have a solid bounce back effort in Vancouver for himself, if for nobody else. People were asking about Nascimento, so we asked Greg Vanney after the game about Nascimento, and he says basically they had hoped that actually the paperwork would be done by the game. It wasn't, so now he expects it any day this week, and that he should be available for the next weekend coming up in Vancouver. I don't know what that means. In terms of how much he plays, how much he doesn't play. I don't know what the plans are for him. It's probably a conversation I should probably have. But at the same time, that is sort of his availability. The other thing I think that we're tracking a little bit of, Kevin, is just the general allocation money and everything that changed hands and where we finally are. So I wanted to get the jam tracker out. The LA Galaxy, at my estimation, I would like to point out this is an estimation, and the biggest reason it's an estimation is we do not know how much money the LA Galaxy converted from the $4 million fee that they got for Dejan Jovalic. And that $4 million, they can convert up to $3 million. The only thing I do know is the Galaxy would not, and we're not going to convert all $3 million of their max cap of the $4 million, right? So they have $4 million. They're allowed at a cap of $3 million to convert into general allocation money. I was told they were not going to do that. I don't know how much that is, so I guessed. I said it's $1 million. But basically that leaves the LA Galaxy at 3.9 million and some change of general allocation money, and that all goes down to paying down the cap and everything else. I also think that there is pretty good evidence that the LA Galaxy now have a summer move within them. I don't know how big the summer move could be without moving somebody else, but I do believe they could probably still add a player if they wanted to add a player. We're not talking designated player. We're not talking any of those things. That's not something you should get super excited about. But bottom line is, I think that they will be able to add one reinforcement, and then if they wanted to move other pieces, they could possibly get into that second player and do some things there. So that's something to watch. The other thing is international slots. I went and now I have all your 11 internationals for the LA Galaxy in terms of the 11 that they are going to count against the senior squad, right? So everybody knows that you get 8 spots, 8 international slots, Kevin, and then you can trade for other ones. So the LA Galaxy were able to add 3 other international slots. So they got one from Montreal in the Tyler Boyd deal back in the day in 2023, right? So they got that one. They have one from Nashville, which they got one from Montreal. I flip-flopped these basically. Nashville and the Boyd deal, that's the one that they got for that one. Then you had one in Montreal, which was the Jalen Neal deal, and then they went out and got one from Orlando City. So Orlando City and Nascimento was the one who was going to take that, but basically they went in and got a Orlando City deal with some jam in there, and so they were able to get that Orlando City spot. So that's how they have 11.
So here's the dumb question. How come Ricky is not on there? Is he just not on the roster and they don't need to use an international slot for him now?
When Ricky is injured, he does not need an international slot. However, that does, of course, beg the question of what happens whenever Ricky comes back. I don't have the answer to you. I'm just telling you that whenever he comes back and they want to put him back on the roster, they will need an international slot, which means either somebody's getting their green card or, that's not happening. So it's just an interesting thing to sort of look. Greg Vanney, when asked about timetable on Ricky Puig, says we're not even close to that yet. So that sort of gives you an idea of when. Again, I think the August-September is going to be my guess as of right now, and I would lean more towards September than August. So that's what the LA Galaxy have to look forward to.
So that's like making a trade for the most dynamic player in the league in the last 2 months of the season.
Sure.
Will it matter? Will it matter at that point?
That's a good question, and certainly if you're the LA Galaxy making the playoffs and at least solidifying the fact that you could be in the playoffs at that point would be good, and then have Ricky Puig come back and figure out how to work him back into a roster that has largely competed without him. It's interesting how quickly the games mean something, because when we look at the schedule again, Vancouver coming up 2:00 Sunday, MLS season pass, right? This is a super important game for the Galaxy because, again, you don't want to start 0-2. You don't want to then have to go into CONCACAF Champions Cup without having won. And then you're going to have to go on the road in CONCACAF Champions Cup, wherever that ends up being, right? So there's all these things that you can sort of look at and say, that, some of that doesn't make sense. If the Galaxy start losing games, the Galaxy could come back winless, and all of a sudden now you're facing St. Louis, right? So some interesting parts of that. Just the pressure will ratchet up quickly just because you need to figure out how to get a win.
And you think the Galaxy might be watching that Champions Cup game this week? Because if Real Salt Lake wins, it's a 2-hour trip. If Real Salt Lake loses, it's a long flight down to Costa Rica in the middle of the week. Yeah,
Herediano would be a trip. By the way, I would like to point out LA Galaxy,
Bruce Arena leading the conference.
That's the problem. That's not the takeaway here. The takeaway is the LA Galaxy are back in 13th. They're in 13th spot. They were in 13th most of the year in 2023. They're now back in 13th again. I would just like to point that out, that on this show, many times we made fun of the fact that the LA Galaxy were still in 13th, and as they sit right now, they are in 13th. So,
and Bruce Arena also leads the Supporters Shield standings.
On goal differential. I'm real worried about it. Vancouver's in second because they scored 4 goals, but they allowed 1. Bruce's side allowed 4 goals, scored 4 goals and allowed 0. So,
and when you think about how bad the Earthquakes were last year, they gave up more goals than any team in MLS history, and now they get a clean sheet in the first game. Wow.
It's the Bruce Arena effect. San Jose is going to be a good team this year. Just get used to that. The teams that I feel like might not be great. Kansas City, I am certainly going to be keeping my eye on.
Yeah, I think Peter Vermees is in his last season. I don't know if he'll make it to the finish.
I'm really interested to see how Houston does, because Houston's sometimes that borderline team, but whenever they have bad years, they sink real fast. Portland is going to be a question mark for me at the beginning of this. I'm trying to see who's up top. Colorado is a question mark for me. I never know how to peg Colorado. They have good years, they have bad years. They're going to have some superior play in order to sort of make it be one of those good years. Oh, yeah, by the way, somebody pointed out the New York Red Bulls are also in 13th. So both MLS Cup teams
good point.
In 13th place.
You're looking at the Eastern Conference. I think this might be the year Charlotte really makes a statement. They've been building for a while. I think they could have a really good season. I like Seattle. I think Seattle may be the best team in the West.
I almost feel like we should start. I could start a podcast that just goes over the MLS documentary that's out there. There's some amazing things in there. One is that, of course, focusing on the LA Galaxy to start the season, and in episode 1, the Galaxy get a lot of time. The Galaxy end up showing it up in 2 other episodes. I think it's like 7 and 8, or 6 and 8, or something like that. But there's a transfer window one where the LA Galaxy are not supposed to be the feature of this transfer, and it talks about the transfer of Marco Reus to the LA Galaxy instead of to Charlotte. If you want to watch somebody's life drain out of their face on camera, it's whenever Will Kuntz calls the GM from Charlotte and tells him that Marco Reus is not coming to Charlotte, that he's coming to the LA Galaxy. There was, you could just see it. You could just see the whole thing. It is absolutely can't miss television. You need to watch it. I also like the fact that the MLS documentary team was not afraid to have heroes and villains in some of these things, right? Didn't shy away from it at all. Go watch the Matt Miazga episode and sort of you tell me what you think of him whenever you get out the backside. This wasn't about putting a nice shiny polish on everything. They even got Greg Vanney going after former players, he said, that that talk bad about the LA Galaxy, that were supposed to be Galaxy players. And I have a pretty good feeling I know who he's talking about. And to me, I'm like, so it definitely shows a side of Vanney, one that's uber competitive, which you would expect from it, but maybe a little petty too, right? So just some super interesting stuff whenever you get a chance.
I did a story in that documentary series, and the guy who made it, the filmmaker, he actually did the F1 Drive to Survive series, which was really good. It started just before COVID, but it really took on a life of its own during COVID. And he talked about that was the start of season 3. And people that work in motorsports credit that with actually pretty much saving F1. It was losing fans. It was losing attention. This documentary comes why people are trapped inside during COVID. He said in season 1, there was a spectacular crash, and there was a driver that got out of the car, which was on flames, and the driver was on flames, and he walked away. And the documentary filmmaker said, we didn't script that. We didn't know there was going to be COVID. Everyone's trapped in their homes, and they're watching a guy on fire walk away from a race car. And he said, we couldn't have drawn it up any better than that. And so he went into this series with a little bit of a cachet and kind of got to tell MLS, this is what we want to do. This is where we want to put our mics. These are the people we want to talk to. And they did get surprised by the Galaxy. I think when they went into it, they had an idea it was going to be Messi and company, and that's what they're going to do, follow Messi around. And the Galaxy wind up having such a spectacular season that I think in midstream, they had to start saying, well, we got to pay attention to this Galaxy team. This is really interesting what's going on over here. And it did turn out to be, I think there was 10 parts to this, 8 parts, and 3 of the episodes featured the Galaxy very heavily.
Yeah, again, obviously the last one in the MLS Cup is a good one there. Gary, by the way, $2 super chat says, hearing Greg Vanney swear is the best thing ever. One is, I know Greg Vanney swears. I would also like to point out, I swear as well. Nobody ever believes me whenever I tell this. If you've only met me on podcasts, they have no idea.
Well, you know what? That's so funny that he brings it up, because I asked the filmmaker that. I said, you had Will Kuntz on there. He was swearing. And I personally never heard Vanney swear much.
Right.
I never heard Will Kuntz swear. I never heard Vanney swear much. And the first 2 times that they're introduced in the podcast, they're swearing like sailors. And I said, did you tell them to do that? I asked the filmmaker, did you tell them to do that? Oh. He goes, no, we kind of encouraged them to be a little salty, but we didn't tell them to do that.
Right.
I was surprised.
No, well, I mean,
Pat Noonan as well.
Pat Noonan
swearing.
Watch Pat. That's one to watch, by the way. Onside is the documentary. I can't.
He said that was one of his. The filmmaker said that episode with what is it called? The Hell rivalry.
Oh, Hell is Real.
Hell is Real rivalry. He said he loved that because Wilfred Nancy and Pat Noonan were like yin and yang. They were so different. And they were coming together to play in this big, really important game.
And Pat Noonan has 0 time for Wilfred Nancy's talking about the game. It is hysterical. I was cracking up. I want you to know I stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning, I think last Friday, watching most of the episodes. it surpassed what I thought it could. I thought it was going to be whatever, right? Like I was like, oh, this will be interesting. I'm like, when's the next one coming out? It's like, you have to wait a whole year for it to come out again. If they decide to do another one, which I hope they do, it is.
They're talking about it right now. I think it's going to happen. I think everyone just didn't want to say it, but I'm pretty sure they're already filming stuff.
Yeah, I've seen some cameras around that type of thing, but man, I really enjoyed it. So Onside is the MLS doc that's there. Let's get to a couple other things that I wanted to highlight. One is the LA Galaxy United team, again, 2025 team tryouts coming up on Sunday, March 2nd. You can see on the screen there is an email address there. It is Calicino, I think, at SOSC.org. I'm going to spell it for you. CAULICINO at SOSC.org. That's who you're going to want to register with.
Do we bring our own cleats and boots and stuff?
Yeah, I don't even want to. They shouldn't allow you to play. Sunday, March 2nd is the tryouts. 9 a.m. check-in, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. tryouts. Again, open to, see, you're out of it, Kevin. Ages 16 to 25.
I just missed it.
Yeah, so open to new and returning Special Olympics athletes and unified partners. So go out and be a part of this. It's going to be a really, really amazing thing. Let's see. How many fans did MLS lose? This is a good question. How many fans did MLS lose due to Apple TV being the only way to watch games? I think there's a good argument about that. I actually think that having them all in one controlled area is the best way for people to actually watch games. Yeah, it's true that sometimes that means that you don't have the ability to sort of pick up casuals. But I also think that in a world that is as fragmented as the sports world is, that there aren't that many casuals of sports anymore. You usually lock into one thing and you sort of stay there. So for me, the watching experience has been amazing. Because I know where every game is. I know there's no blackouts. I know what I can watch it on my phone. It is more accessible to me than it has ever been.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, you talk about how amazing this documentary is. It's behind a paywall. You got to subscribe to it. You got to go in there. People that find it are already fans.
Everything is behind a paywall. Your paper is behind a paywall.
It is.
That's what I'm just saying. It's just and we can't go back to 1995 and say, oh, let's just make everything free again. That doesn't happen.
You have to be an MLS fan, I think, to find that documentary, and that's unfortunate because I think if other people found it, they would become MLS fans.
Wait a minute, though. It's on Apple TV. Apple TV doesn't just cater to MLS fans. So if you have Apple TV, you don't have to have an MLS season pass in order to get the documentary.
Yeah, but I would argue that like the F1 series was on Netflix. I mean, I think it's a much wider audience, and it wasn't on F1 racing, plus. But the point I was going to make was you talk about Apple TV. Apple TV did make a very big change this year. Yesterday's game was the Sunday game.
Sunday Night Soccer.
Right. We don't have this window where everybody plays at the same time. And I think it was obvious that this was going to happen, and Apple TV and MLS finally recognized after 2 seasons. Don Garber talked about it. He said, we had 1 million viewers on per weekend last year. Yeah, but there was 14 games. Do the math. It's like 71,000 people a game. So what they're doing now is they're breaking that up. So you all the games aren't on at the same time.
Right.
If you want to watch the game, you can watch the game, and then you can watch another game and another game. You can watch 3 or 4 games in a weekend. You couldn't do that before. Everybody was on at pretty much the same time or around the same time, East or West Coast. So I do think that they did recognize that was a mistake, and they did change some of the timing so you can watch more games and should draw a bigger audience.
I would just like to point out Netflix also is a specialized service behind a paywall. All right.
It is, but it's not MLS season pass.
You don't have to have MLS season pass to get the documentary. That's the whole point of it, is that it's inside of Apple TV, not inside of MLS season pass. Season pass, you can watch a documentary and then go, man, I'm going to subscribe to that F1 series of awesome races.
It'd be smart if they had like a flashing thing at the bottom.
Yeah, just the whole time they did it. No, but that's what I'm saying is, listen, I like the idea of being able to struggle through to surf through channels. By the way, who surfs through channels anymore? Who turns the television on without something to watch? Because one, I don't like commercials, and if I'm looking for something to watch, I usually just go to sports and be like, what's on type thing. You could do that, and it can show that. They also have season. So I think that in a world that it is today, that the Apple TV deal is a great thing for the league. I think that Apple as a brand gives them a ton of exposure in what they're trying to do. Is it, are there going to be people who can whine and complain? Yeah, there's people who whine and complain about freaking everything if you haven't paid attention, right? So I just think that this was the best deal for MLS to make. And I think it gave them the most money, and I think it has possibly the most upside to it. I don't think that MLS is being sheltered by anything. It is available worldwide. Stuff was never available worldwide. They sold individual rights across everything. So you had different rights in Argentina and different rights in France and different rights. It was too fragmented. So this is one thing. If you have your phone with you, Kevin, and you're in France, you can watch the LA Galaxy game. You will not get geo blocked out. You can watch it. Doesn't matter where you are.
Are you telling me you don't have rabbit ears on top of your TV?
I don't, by the way. I don't think I ever had a TV with rabbit ears. I'm trying to remember. I think I had one with an antenna back in the day. It was a long time ago.
I had black and white TV. You probably never even heard of that.
We used to have, remember whenever they made like real small like TVs that like, they would be black and white, right? Because they couldn't figure out how to get the color tubes inside the little things.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the MLS demographic is very young. 18 to 34 is the prime demographic. Those are the people that are watching streaming TV. My son's 31. He's never had a TV. We bought him a TV. He used it to play video games. He always watched TV on our programming on his computer and his phone. So MLS fans are totally comfortable with that. And we just saw Major League Baseball tell ESPN, we're not coming back to ESPN. We're going streaming too. We're not going to be on ESPN anymore.
I mean, at the peak, ESPN was where it was at, and that peak is no longer there. And at one time, one of the best sports deals, the TV deals the LA Galaxy ever had was with Spectrum, right? With Time Warner Cable was original there. And that is, it was one of those deals where you could sit there and say, hey, it didn't turn out the best at the end of it, but that the LA Galaxy got paid more than most teams in Major League Soccer. It's about money. It's about viewership and money. What Apple has to pay the league, what the league has to pay the teams, all those things. And as viewership goes up, Apple has to cough up more money. So everybody at least is incentivized to try and grow the league. Going back to T-Mobile, having T-Mobile give out free passes for MLS Season Pass again was another big one that they had this year. By the way, Jose, $5 super chat. The documentary is awesome. I hope this is a yearly thing because it compares to the NFL's Hard Knocks. Keep up the great work, COG. I mean, we didn't have anything to do with the documentary.
Well, one thing about the documentary, that was made by MLS and IMG. It's their partner. Apple TV just provides the venue to watch it. They're not doing very much promotion in my mind. The promotion's all coming from MLS. They're doing the programming. They do the studio shows. They do the shoulder programming around games. That all comes from MLS. I think MLS is doing a really good job promoting this stuff. I think they probably thought they might get a little more help from Apple.
Right.
Apple is not doing much creatively. They are making the space available, which there is no space. It's streaming. You can put as much stuff in there as you want.
Right.
But this is an Apple TV production, and it shows some blemishes. Credit to MLS for doing that. They've always been so guarded about not showing anything negative. This shows a few blemishes, and it makes you like MLS better, I think.
Yeah. Of that. Well, I mean, it certainly likes you like the league. If you go and watch the Tim Parker episode and watching him have to change teams, he certainly draws questions about the league's ability to once again keep the journeyman around, do the things that you're supposed to do, but also it shows the harsh reality of what it means to be a professional athlete. We've been trying to highlight that as much as possible. I was having a conversation with somebody close to the team. I said, it's important to celebrate the successes, but what happens with the failures? And if you go and watch players, MLS players, just on any given team, there are more failures on the team than there are successes. That is how that works every single time, every year. Every year you're going to get new people come in. Every year new people go out. Things change, things turn. There are successes and failures for everything, and we only seem to focus on the successes there, but the failures are so much higher.
Well, and the Ricky Puig episode makes you appreciate that, because we kind of got the impression that he just dropped out of heaven. He was a great player, and he just landed here and great. And here he is. They talk a lot about his experience in Barcelona and how the team gave up on him and how he worshipped Messi and wanted to play with Messi, and that didn't happen. And he was very disappointed that he had to leave, but he didn't have a choice. And then he shows up here and he plays so well, and it makes him, I think, look better as a player, as a person, more character to overcome that. If we didn't know all that, he'd just be a great player. Now he's a great player with a lot of character and a guy who's overcome obstacles.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, watching Ricky Puig talk about all that. So really
in English, a lot of it in English.
A lot, yeah. And by the way, he speaks English fine. He always has. No, I'm a big fan of the documentary. I always think that they could do things differently. I just think that we're so skewed from viewership numbers anymore. I was actually, funny enough, I was having a conversation, anecdotally, I was having a conversation with my dad, and we were talking about TGL, the golf league, right? I don't know if everybody's been watching that. I told Kevin that I actually watch it. I was watching it before it came on. I actually love watching TGL. It is like, it's a cross between, simulator golf and real on-world golf. And it's all played in this like stadium that they purposely built. And it's on a green that has like 67 actuators that change it. So you see this video screen and you hit the ball, like you hit a real ball into the video screen. And then it shows you the result of the shot on the video screen and where it lands on the fairway. And then you go and take your ball and you put it on the real grass and you hit your approach shot. And then whenever it lands on the green, a little light comes down on this real green that's there. And you place the ball where that is, because it's now you're in real space, right? So anyway, you can play, I think they play 15 holes of golf, because it's not even 18 holes, but they play 15 holes. They play it in different rounds. They have all this stuff. And I said, that's really been a huge success for ESPN. And he's like, well, how many people are they getting? I go, well, they were hoping that they were going to get like around 400 to 500,000 people watching. And I go, but they've been getting 800, and some of that's been higher. They've had episodes where it's been over 1 million and all this stuff. And he goes, well, that's not even that many people. And I go, whoa, calm down. I go, I understand that you grew up in the day of 33 million people watched this game on CBS because there were 7 channels, and that's where we have fragmented everything. There's a channel for everything. So when you look at it, getting 800,000 people to watch your show on a regular basis is amazing numbers. Like, just really good, solid numbers for everyday programming that's not a Super Bowl or a World Cup or Champions League or something like that.
Well, it's not the final episode of MASH. Come on.
Yeah,
Get off my lawn.
Yeah,
Get off my lawn.
What was the number on the final
About
episode?
85,000 or something.
85 million, right? Like it was some ridiculous number. It's like there's 6 channels on and everybody wants to watch the final episode of MASH.
I really wanted to see that episode. I remember I was living in the Bay Area at the time, and our power went out, and my wife and I went to a El Torito and got the people in the bar to put it on. We watched the final episode of MASH at El Torito.
That is a classic Kevin Baxter story right there, and a good one to end on. Galaxy makes some adjustments in Vancouver for you, Kevin?
Yes. Winder, I think that's a good call. Somebody in place of Royce could be Winder. He'd probably deserve the shot. I think we'll see some Ruben Ramos in there. Mm-hmm. Does Ramirez start, or did Miguel Berry earn a shot?
No,
I think
Ramirez.
I think a lot. Yeah, I think Ramirez will be back there, but there could be a lot of experimentation with the fallback being we didn't want to play him on the turf.
I think
because you need an excuse.
Yeah, no, I one, Mitrovic still starts and nothing's going to change that. And then 2 is for me, Aude on the left hand side. I want that. Winder in the center, I think, to start. Although again, I'm telling you right now, going to be a lot more. It's going to be way rough. It's going to be rough if you start Winder. It's going to be a lot more rough than if you put Royce in there. But I don't think that they're going to push Royce too much. See, here's the thing. Depending on where you once you know where you're actually playing, you might be able to set the rotation for Sunday a little bit differently, right? Like if you know that you're going to go to RSL, maybe you can be like, Royce is going to play at RSL whenever we play at RSL. If you're going down to Costa Rica, maybe he doesn't play, right? Like maybe that's one of those. It's like, hey, that's not worth it to sort of take somebody down there, that type of thing. I'm interested to see how it all sort of plots out and plays out. I think the Galaxy would like to win this CONCACAF Champions Cup series that they're playing in, and I think that they know that they have some development to do in between that. This is not saying that they don't take it seriously. I think they do, but I think there's always also a chance for some development within this and some team development.
It's interesting what you say about Royce. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think if you go to Costa Rica, hostile environment, maybe Royce starts. But one of the things you just talked about, this video golf kind of thing, part real life and part video. When you're looking at these games on the schedule, you're looking at games and you say, well, they're going to go here and they're going to play, Vancouver. Well, it's on turf. It's in another country. It's a long trip. It's on turf. They come back. Well, they might go to Costa Rica. Well, that's a hostile environment. They play on grass. They might go to Real Salt Lake. That's at altitude.
Yeah, I know.
All this stuff is difficult. And so you can't just kind of look at it and say there's a game. No, they got to five hours to Costa Rica. And it's going to be hot and humid, and the temperatures are going to be different. Or they're going to go to altitude where it's going to be cold, could possibly snow. Who knows? You saw what happened with LAFC when they played in Colorado, 1 degree at kickoff. So it's just not putting the list of games on a paper and saying they play 7 games in 27 days. It's at altitude. It's in Costa Rica. It's in a different country. It's on turf. I think they have a Portland game coming up. That will be on turf as well. Mm-hmm. So and Greg Vanny has to take all that into account. I'm sure he's thinking 3 or 4 games ahead. Well, if I use Marco Reus here, I can't use him there. Which one do I want to use him in?
Yeah, no, it's again, it's why I don't like to. I'm
And-
not making the big bucks. I'm not making the.
And you mentioned Winder and Audi, I think is a good call. Taking nothing away from John Nelson, I think John Nelson's been outstanding, and the Galaxy probably would not have won MLS Cup without him. But you're right, if they need some more offense. But you talk about put Winder in there, it changes the way they play. It does. Do you want to do that right now when you just had Greg Vanny says it looks like we've never met each other before. We didn't look like a championship team. We look like trying to put puzzle pieces together is one analogy used. Okay, so if you admit that you're struggling with the chemistry, do you want to blow it up in the second game of the season?
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have a choice, but that's another thing he has to think about.
Oh man, it cracks me up. This is great, by the way. In the chat room, somebody goes, I remember looking up TV shows on TV Guide, right? The TV Guide, pulling out the TV Guide, opening that up, trying to figure out. You got to buy it at the supermarket when you're there, right? You got to. Some people had subscriptions, but like you were always like, it'll be fine. I'm going to go to the super. You went to the supermarket all the time too. That's something that has changed in a lot of people's ways because my wife specifically my wife works, I work, the whole deal. So she has somebody else do the shopping, which never used to be a thing that you could do, right? Just some crazy times whenever you think about how much has changed. But that means the TV landscape has changed. That means that it's not the same. You're not going to get the numbers that you used to get. So how do you carve out your niche? That's all I want to see. Carve it out and figure out how to use and make that bigger. There was even a YouTube video today talking about how MLS is pushing on NHL to take over the top 4 spot, right? To sort of be in that big 4 professional sports that Major League Soccer is right behind. So, yeah.
Well, here's how old I am. I actually wrote a story for the TV Guide once, a freelance story. So that's how old I am. Okay. By the way, when you talk about your wife getting someone to buy groceries and this whole thing with TV and I think the movie WALL-E, the cartoon movie about 10 years ago, remember WALL-E? And all the humans were these big fat blobs and chairs, and the robots did everything. We're heading there.
Yeah,
we're gonna be. I'm a big fat blob already.
I'm on my way. Yeah. By the way, shout out to Steven at AFJA who came in clutch with the piping Hapapusas right at
for some
deadline.
of us. For some of us,
that's okay. You get yours. Relax. How much promoting do you do? I just want to know. The whole deal. Somebody works really hard at it. Somebody makes sure that they have their hat on all the time. Somebody has their little guy down here has the AFJA Papusa hat on.
Well, I have some sort of hat on.
You have a press hat. You have a press hat.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, that's where it goes. But no, it was great seeing everybody. I got to see so many people. So great to get in touch, and it feels like we were just there, and also it felt new. So it was one of those. It was like, oh, okay.
You know what you didn't see?
What?
You didn't see a goal.
I was going to say a goal by the Galaxy. That is correct. 100%. All right.
When was the last time they were shut out at home? Because they were unbeaten, so they probably scored a goal in every game, right? There might have been a scoreless draw.
There could have been a score. I don't think there was though last year. They didn't have too many scoreless draws. I'd have to go back.
I didn't even think of looking that up. When was the last time they were scoreless at home? It's been a while.
I'll look it up for Thursday, maybe. So no problem. Alexis says Ozempic will solve everything, so we don't have to worry about that. See, we're good. Drugs will save us, Kevin. We're fine.
A robot will bring it to us.
100%. You can just order it. Instacart comes right to you, so no problems. All right. Anything else? You good?
I'm good.
All right.
I guess. Whatever.
Yeah, well, we'll see. If you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter on any of the social media, it's at KBaxter11. Check him on out. And then, of course, go to LA Times for all of his wonderful articles. I think headed to spring training, a little NASCAR as well coming up. So Kevin's got a lot of stuff on deck there for the LA Times. Make sure you check him out and support him. If you're looking for me on any of the socials, at Galaxy Podcast, cornerofthegalaxy.com, and, of course, at YouTube or Spotify or Apple iTunes, type in Corner of the Galaxy. That's where you can find us. We're have a big growth push on YouTube, so head on over there and subscribe. Make sure you turn on your little notifications bell. All right, for Mr. Kevin the Panda Baxter, I'm Josh Pato Guesman, and you've been listening to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening. We ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye.